The halls of Congress erupted in heated debate this week as Democrats confronted Republican lawmakers over what they called glaring hypocrisy in their approach to judicial injunctions. At the center of the storm was a hearing in the House Rules Committee, where Democratic Congressman Joe Negus grilled MAGA Republican Darrell Issa over his proposed legislation to limit the power of federal judges to issue nationwide injunctions. Negus pressed Issa on his sudden concern for reining in judicial authority, pointing out that during the Biden administration, Republicans celebrated similar injunctions blocking key policies. During President Biden's tenure, there were 14 nationwide injunctions. Did you denounce any of them? Negus demanded. Issa stumbled, admitting he hadn't scrutinized the cases but insisted his bill aimed to prevent rogue rulings. Negus fired back, citing a 2023 tweet from Issa praising a Louisiana judge who halted Biden's efforts to regulate social media. You called it right on target then, Negus said. Now you're here claiming judges overreach. What changed? The tension didn't stop there. Democrats also called out MAGA Republicans for endangering judges by posting wanted-style signs targeting jurists who ruled against Trump. Congressman Jim McGovern displayed photos of these posters plastered outside GOP offices, calling them threatening and despicable. He urged bipartisan condemnation, noting judges' families had faced harassment. While Republicans like Issa distanced themselves from the posters, they deflected by accusing Democrats of ignoring threats against GOP members, a claim met with eye rolls from Democrats who stressed the urgency of protecting judicial independence. Meanwhile, the White House faced its own turmoil. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt struggled to defend the administration's economic policies amid plummeting markets and backlash over proposed tariffs. When pressed on how farmers would be affected, Leavitt offered no exemptions, doubling down on Trump's America First trade agenda. Reporters then cornered her on Trump's recent musings about a third term, a constitutional impossibility. Leavitt dismissed the questions as hypothetical, insisting Trump was focused on his current term, but her deflection only fueled skepticism. The conference grew more chaotic as Leavitt clashed with reporters over due process concerns in immigration enforcement. A journalist cited a Department of Homeland Security document outlining vague criteria like tattoos or clothing brands used to label migrants as gang members for deportation. Leavitt accused the media of undermining law enforcement, shouting, "Shame on you for covering for these vicious gangs." But when confronted with the document's specifics, she pivoted to praising Trump's toughness, refusing to address the lack of transparency. As the Dow plunged over 700 points, economists warned of stagflation risks. Yet the administration's response seemed disjointed, a mix of tariff bravado and evasion. Behind the scenes, leaks revealed alarming security lapses, including exposed personal data of officials. Leavitt claimed transparency, but critics argued the administration's chaos was on full display. The day's events painted a stark picture, a Congress divided over the rule of law, and a White House scrambling to contain self-inflicted crises. With tensions escalating, all eyes turned to the Oval Office, where even bigger fireworks were brewing. The Oval Office became the stage for a surreal spectacle this week as former President Donald Trump, flanked by musician Kid Rock, held a rambling press conference that veered from bizarre personal anecdotes to alarming foreign policy rhetoric. The event underscored growing concerns about the administration's stability amid global crises and domestic controversies. Trump opened with a puzzling tangent about being called kind, a word he claimed was old-fashioned and unfamiliar. "Somebody said I'm a kind person," he mused, drawing baffled reactions. "I said, say that again. I'd never heard it before." The remark, made while critics accuse him of gutting Social Security and veterans programs, highlighted the disconnect between his self-image and policy impacts. The tone turned darker as Trump echoed Kremlin talking points on Ukraine, blaming NATO expansion for Putin's invasion. "They said Ukraine wouldn't get into NATO. That's probably why the war started," he asserted, ignoring Russia's unilateral aggression. The comments drew swift condemnation from foreign policy experts who warned that such rhetoric undermines international alliances and emboldens autocrats. Equally jarring was Trump's callous description of a tragedy in Lithuania, where 4 US soldiers died when their armored vehicle plunged into a frozen lake. Instead of offering condolences, he fixated on the truck's weight, calling it like a toy and attributing the accident to ice and cold weather. Veterans groups slammed his lack of empathy, noting the family's grief was overshadowed by his mechanical recounting of details. Domestically, Trump pivoted to campaigning for a far-right Wisconsin Supreme Court candidate, Brad Schimel, urging supporters to make this one too big to rig, a nod to his baseless election fraud claims. He framed the race as a battle against a radical left lunatic, despite Wisconsin's history of narrow judicial elections. Critics accused him of politicizing the judiciary from the Oval Office, further eroding public trust in institutions. The conference grew stranger as Trump hawked Tesla vehicles, praising Elon Musk as an American patriot while ignoring the automaker's plummeting stock. "I bought one for the staff," he boasted, though aides later clarified the claim was exaggerated. His incoherent aside about Dogecoin, Doge could be close to $1 trillion, left observers scratching their heads, particularly as he conflated the cryptocurrency with Musk's unrelated ventures. Geopolitical gaffes continued as Trump butchered the pronunciation of Qatar, marveling at his own shift from tar to Qatar, as if it were a diplomatic breakthrough. "Nobody ever corrected me," he shrugged, underscoring his unorthodox approach to foreign relations. Meanwhile, his administration faced scrutiny over ICE's abduction of a Turkish student critical of Israel. When asked about the lack of due process, Trump deflected, "I haven't looked at it in detail," despite the victim's academic credentials and zero criminal charges. As the press conference spiraled, Trump casually floated unconstitutional ideas, joking about running for a third term if Obama did. While his press secretary later dismissed it as hypothetical, legal scholars warned that such rhetoric normalizes authoritarianism. The remark capped a day of erratic behavior, from policy non sequiturs to self-aggrandizing tangents, leaving even allies uneasy. Behind the scenes, leaks revealed alarming gaps in national security. A German newspaper exposed sensitive data, passwords, emails of Trump officials, including National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, raising questions about the administration's competence. Yet Trump's team brushed it off, insisting they were transparent, even as markets tanked and experts predicted economic stagflation. By day's end, the press conference symbolized an administration adrift, a mix of propaganda, personal vendettas, and policy voids. With global alliances strained and domestic credibility crumbling, the White House's chaos seemed less a temporary stumble than a defining trait. As the week drew to a close, the Trump administration's compounding crises reached a boiling point, with economic instability and institutional decay colliding in unprecedented fashion. The Dow's historic plunge, 724 points in a single day, served as a grim backdrop to a White House increasingly seen as unmoored from reality. Analysts pinned the crash on Trump's tariff rollout, dubbed Liberation Day, which markets interpreted as a reckless escalation of trade wars. Auto giants GM and Ford saw shares nosedive, while farmers reeled after the administration confirmed there would be no exemptions from the tariffs, despite Trump's earlier promises to protect rural voters. The White House press briefing devolved into a spectacle of defensiveness as Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt sparred with reporters. A Fox News poll showing 56% disapproval of Trump's economic handling hung over the room, but Leavitt dismissed it, blaming decades of unfair trade practices and previous incompetence for the turmoil. When pressed on plans to stabilize markets, she touted an upcoming Rose Garden event to celebrate tariffs, framing it as a patriotic reset. "Wednesday will be historic," she declared, though economists warned of long-term damage to global supply chains and consumer prices. National security failures further eroded confidence. A German investigative outlet revealed that personal data, passwords, emails, phone numbers of top officials, including National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, had been leaked online due to shockingly lax protocols. The breach exposed vulnerabilities in an administration already under fire for casually texting classified war plans. Leavitt waved off concerns, insisting the matter was closed and security measures updated, but experts called it a systemic failure. "This isn't just sloppiness, it's a national security crisis," said one former Pentagon official. The administration's draconian immigration policies also faced scrutiny. Reporters cited a leaked DHS manual showing migrants could be labeled gang members and deported based on arbitrary criteria like tattoos of sports teams or streetwear brands. Leavitt erupted when challenged, accusing journalists of siding with vicious gangs and shouting, "Shame on you." Yet the document's details painted a stark picture. A 24-year-old student with an autism awareness tattoo and no criminal record had been sent to El Salvador's detention camps without due process. Legal advocates condemned the system as constitution-free zones, while Leavitt doubled down, praising ICE agents for protecting American lives. Internally, the administration's dysfunction spilled into public view. Staffers described a culture of paranoia, with Trump privately fuming over negative coverage and demanding loyalty pledges. His fixation on high IQ people like Elon Musk, whose erratic tenure saw Tesla stocks crater, contrasted with his dismissal of career officials as deep state obstacles. Meanwhile, MAGA allies on Capitol Hill struggled to deflect Trump's authoritarian leanings. When asked about his third-term musings, GOP senators dodged, calling it hypothetical and refusing to affirm constitutional limits. The week's chaos culminated in Trump's cryptic remarks about economic pain being necessary for gain. MAGA Senator Tommy Tuberville, RAL, echoed the sentiment, stating, "Short-term suffering is going to be great to revive manufacturing," a message that rang hollow to families facing soaring grocery bills and layoffs. As markets closed Friday, the S&P and Nasdaq joined the Dow in freefall, with analysts warning of stagflation's return. "This isn't a correction, it's a collapse," said one Wall Street strategist, and the White House has no plan. By nightfall, the administration's narrative of strength lay in tatters. From the Capitol to corporate boardrooms, trust in Trump's leadership evaporated, replaced by alarm over his disregard for democratic norms and economic stability. Even Fox News, typically a staunch ally, aired polls reflecting broad public discontent. Yet Trump remained defiant, rallying supporters with promises of one big beautiful bill to fix everything, a vow as vague as it was improbable. As the nation braced for another volatile week, the question lingered: could institutions withstand the onslaught, or would the compounding crises redefine American governance itself? For now, the answer seemed written in the numbers: financial, political, and human, all pointing downward.